Today, we are going to be talking about the Pacific. So, the Pacific is an ocean. Let's look at a map right quick here. This is the Pacific Ocean. It is the biggest ocean in the world. Here you see is America, the United States of America. We're somewhere around here. You can see where my mouse is pointing. I don't know if you can. And then China, which we talked about before, is all the way over here. Japan is here. So it's a really big ocean. It's so big that you could fit all of the land, I think, in the world in there. It's a very, very big ocean. And we're going to be talking today, not just about the water and the fish, although there are those too, quite a bit of water, quite a bit of fish. We're going to be talking about these islands and the people who live there. So you can see sometimes Nauru gets counted, but we have the Norfolk Islands, New Caledonia, Fiji, Tonga, Cook Islands, American Samoa, Pago Pago, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, the Marshall Islands, Pohnpei. Sometimes that one's also called non-Madal. Rapa Nui somewhere over here, or Easter Island. And here is Hawaii, or Hawaii, which is part of America. All right, let's continue to, and before we do that, I want to also introduce another one. Here we have another map of what things are. So we're going to be talking about people in the Pacific, and they usually get grouped into three basic places, basically. So you have people who are from this region are called Melanesian. Right, so in the islands in here are called Micronesian, and the islands out here, way out even farther, are called Polynesian. All right. And the first one that we are going to look at is in Polynesia, and we are going to be reading about Hawaii. This book's called Hawaii, or Hawaii. The Aloha State. The state of Hawaii is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, located north of the equator, which means like up of the equator. So it's farther north than it is south, is what they're saying. Hawaii is made up of an archipelago or chain of islands. So it's more than one island, you can see, and they kind of go out long like they're a chain. California lies about 2,380 miles to the east of Hawaii's capital city, Honolulu, while Japan is close to 4,000 miles its west. In the past, it took weeks to reach these remote islands in a sailing ship. Today, it takes tourists just a few hours to get to Hawaii by airplane. Many people think of Hawaii as a paradise because of its remote location and its incredible natural beauty. chain of islands. If you look at most maps of the state of Hawaii, you will see only 8 islands. In fact, the state covers the entire Hawaiian archipelago, which includes 132 islands, reefs, and shoals, or sandy spots, many of which are very tiny. Hawaii is far from being the world's largest archipelago, but it is still very long. It stretches for over 1,500 miles. Woo. All right. We are going to skip ahead a little bit to talk about the history, because we're focusing on Pacific Islander people in honor of Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which starts next month, but I thought that we should split up Asian American and Pacific Islander so that we have time to cover both. From the beginning, Hawaii was one of the last places on Earth to be populated by people. Scientists believe Polynesians, people from the islands in Asia, Polynesians, as we looked at earlier, are people from the islands more like out here, which isn't usually what's considered. So Asia's here, Polynesia's kind of here. It's believed that a long time ago, what happened was people living who came from way over here, actually probably like way over here, they came up, they went around here, and then they moved to this island called Taiwan. And then from there, they spread out. So some people went this way and this way to the islands here. Some people went to the islands here, to here, to here, and they spread out all over all of these islands. So they're not really in Asia, they're in the Pacific. But people think that their ancestors came from this island and then moved all the way out here to all of these other islands. All right. For years, Polynesians, Melanesians, and Micronesians were traveling from the different islands in the Pacific Ocean. To get to many of these islands, they built huge sea-going canoes. Canoes are a kind of boat, you might try. Each canoe was big enough to hold dozens of people and to travel hundreds and thousands of miles. Because there were no maps and no landmarks to use in the middle of the ocean, travelers had to depend on signs to tell them where they were. These included ocean swells, currents, winds, and cloud formations. At night, they read the stars to find their way. You might remember a little bit of something like that from Moana, which is another thing we're going to talk about a little later. Experts believe that travelers, probably from the Marquesas, which were islands in the South Pacific Ocean, set out to find a new place to settle. These settlers might have been the first to arrive in the Hawaiian Islands. A second wave of settlement in Hawaii occurred around 1300 CE. That means 700 years ago. So around 700 years ago, these new people probably came from Tahiti. Others traveled to make new settlements in the Hawaiian Islands from different islands in the Pacific. Most of what is known of ancient Hawaiian history comes from stories told by the Hawaiian people. This form of storytelling is called an oral tradition. Many native Hawaiians know their long ago past because of stories and myths passed down from one generation to the next. Archaeologists, scientists who study ancient artifacts or ancient stuff like that people make. So they study like ancient, like very old bowls, for an example, are not able to add much information because weather and time have destroyed most of the island's ancient buildings and artifacts. Chiefs and priests ruled each individual Hawaiian island 1,000 years ago, but the islands were not united into a single kingdom. Chiefs claimed large plots of land as well as areas along the coast. They gave smaller portions of land to the rest of the people for farming. Most people had to grow food not only to feed their families, but enough to offer at an annual tribute to the chief. All right, we are going to skip ahead a little bit more. Right. 250 years ago, the first European ships landed at Waimea on Kauai. The British Navy captain, Captain James Cook, one of the most famous explorers of his day, was the captain of the ship. Hawaiian myth stated that one day a new god would come from the sea. This here says that many Hawaiians believe that Captain Cook was their god. This is something that Captain Cook made up afterwards to make himself look good. Hawaiian people used the word that the people of Hawaii used translate means more like powerful person, right? And James Cook was a captain, so he was a powerful person, but they did not think that he was a god coming from the sea. He just made that up later. And also, they spoke different languages, so it's kind of hard to understand each other. Captain Cook judged his first trip to Hawaii as a great success. His crews greatly enjoyed the time they spent on the islands, which were ruled by 4 chiefs. Cook described what he had named the Sandwich Islands as a tropical paradise. When he returned the next year for a second visit, however, trouble erupted. Cook and a few natives got into a big argument over a boat the British believed the natives had stolen. Cook was killed and his crew fled to their ships and left the island. However, Cook's death did not end European interest in the islands. By this time, the British wanted to establish trade with China. One thing the Chinese wanted very much was to buy sandalwood, which grew in Hawaii at the time. Traders came to look for the sweet-smelling sandalwood. They would get the sandalwood from Hawaii and bring it home to sell for a lot of money. A new kingdom. Around the time when Captain Cook first visited the islands, there was a young man named Kamehameha who lived in Kohala on the northern shores of the Big Island. By 1790, so that's another 12 years, so 12 years later, he controlled most of his island. From there, he fought for control of more and more of the islands. By 1810, so that's 20 years after that, he had become Hawaii's first king, having united all the islands into a single kingdom. So King Kamehameha became the first king of all of Hawaii. Kamehameha the first welcomed people from countries such as Europe. He found them interesting and liked the goods that they brought. Over time, Hawaiians became more and more accustomed to the foreigners. A few Hawaiians even agreed to leave Hawaii. In England and the United States, these Hawaiians created a great stir. Missionaries, people who traveled to new places to spread their religion, we talked about what religion is before, were interested in what they saw as a backward people. The missionaries began to talk about bringing the Christian religion to the islands. That wasn't very nice of them to think that they were a backwards people, but that is what the missionaries from the United States and Europe thought. In 1819, 2 important things happened. First, King Kamehameha I died and his wife ruled until one of his sons became old enough to be the new king. Also, American whaling ships arrived for the first time. Whaling ships are ships that hunt whales. With the arrival of the whalers, Hawaii's ports began to develop. The whaling ships came back to Hawaii every winter. Well, that's probably nice because it doesn't get cold there. In 1820, after voyages that lasted many months, right, okay. In 1820, after voyages lasted many months, missionaries also arrived from New England. Over the years, 15 different groups of missionaries came. Missionaries affected the lives of Hawaiian people in both bad and good ways. For instance, the Hawaiian people For instance, the missionaries forced Hawaiians to stop wearing their traditional clothing and stop dancing the hula. But the missionaries also developed a written Hawaiian language and taught many native people to read and write. Um, an interesting thing is that uh, they didn't have enough books when they went to school. But the native Hawaiian children really love to read. So what would happen is they'd have one book out like this, and then they have 5 people looking at that book. Some of them looking at it like from upside down so that they read best. They ended up reading best upside down, some from the side, some got to see it like this. But yeah, they were just really excited to read. Kamehameha's family remained in power for 4 more generations. So um, one generation is like your parents, and then you're another generation. So Kamehameha is like great, 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 great grandchild was the last person in his family to be king or queen. Under the influence of missionaries, King Kamehameha III developed a written constitution in 1840. For a long time, Great Britain, France, and the United States all promised to leave Hawaii independent, but all of these countries wanted to possess the islands, especially after Hawaii began to play an important role in the world's economy. This came about larger crops of sugarcane uh, were grown on the island and exported to countries all over the world. So they started making sugar there, which they sold to people all over the world. Uh, in 1872, Kamehameha V died. In the years that followed, there were struggles over the throne. Some politicians wanted to ignore the natives' constitution. American influence in particular became greater and greater. This was especially true after businessmen like Sanford Dole established pineapple plantations on this island. The businessmen wanted a great deal of say in how the islands were run. In 1875, planters and other businessmen negotiated a special kind of treaty called a reciprocity treaty with the United States. This was a trade agreement that set out rules for trading and selling Hawaiian goods. The federal government said that Hawaiian could sell sugar and other Hawaiian products in the United States without having to pay an extra tax to do so. Eventually, the United States was granted permission to build a naval base at Hawaii's Pearl Harbor. This gave businessmen what they wanted, but only for a time. The businessmen then wanted to talk about annexation. This meant adding Hawaii to the United States. But native Hawaiians did not want the Hawaii to become part of the United States. They wanted to remain free and independent. In 1893, when Hawaiian Queen Lilo introduced a new constitution, Americans living in Hawaii acted on their own ideas, not from any instructions from the United States government, overthrew her kingdom. They took away her power and started their own government in Hawaii. President Grover Cleveland thought that their actions were very unfair and demanded that Hawaii be given back to its people. But the businessmen who had taken over Hawaii ignored his wishes and formed a republic in 1894. Despite some American disapproval, the republic was officially recognized by the United States government. In 1898, during the presidency of William McKinley, the Hawaiian Islands were annexed or added to the United States. Many native Hawaiians still did not want this, but the United States was too powerful and they could not stop the government. In 1900, the Hawaiian Islands were formally organized as a territory. A lot of states, before they become states, are territories. So that's what happened with Hawaii. And then they became a state. And I want to say 75 years ago. So not quite 100 years ago. All right. Let's see here. We will going to skip ahead to, I think actually that might be all we will cover. Some of this talks about some stuff that we're going to talk about for Asian American Heritage Week that we'll be doing. So let's see here. So Hawaiian people were native to Hawaii, meaning like that their ancestors came there a long time ago, like thousands of years, are called Kanaka or Kanaka Maoli. Kanaka. And yeah, that's the Hawaiian flag there. And these are picture to Hawaiian people or Kanaka people. All right, so the last book I'm going to read is also about Polynesia. I couldn't find anything on Micronesia or Melanesia, but we read a lot about Hawaiian history, so I think that's okay. This one is about Moana, because Moana is Polynesian. She is from a Pacific island. I don't remember the name of what her island was specifically. That one's a joke for the older kids. Not older kids, I guess more like a joke for the parents. Anyways, don't pay attention to that. You might get it, you might not. So we'll read a little story from Moana. We're here, Maui said, pointing to a rocky island. Moana stared in dismay. She'd agreed to help the demigod get his magical fish hook back, but she hadn't realized that would involve climbing a super steep cliff. Ooh, I could not climb that. Still, Moana was determined to try. She was on her quest to put the powerful heart of Te Fiti back where it belonged, on the mother island. Maui agreed to help, but only if they retrieved his fish hook first. A giant crab monster named Tamatoa had Maui's hook. Tamatoa lived in the Lalotai, the realm of monsters. That's where monsters live, where Maui and Moana were headed. As Moana struggled upward, Maui said, "Why did your people send you?" "My people didn't send me," Moana replied. "The ocean did." But Maui's question made her wonder. Could she really complete her quest? When they finally reached the top of the hill, Maui slammed his fist down. The ground split apart, revealing a deep chasm, or a big pit, all the way down to the ocean and beyond. Moana gasped as she watched Maui jump. He's jumping. Wow. Probably don't want to jump when it's too high. I know I don't. I can hardly jump off a diving board that's not that hollow. Moana clutched her necklace. In it she kept the heart of Te Fiti. Taking a deep breath, she jumped too. Oh. You think she'll be okay? It's kind of scary. It's a little far to jump. Moana dove into the water, all the way through the ocean, and fell into the world below. Before she knew what was happening, a monster grabbed her. Then chomp! A gigantic plant ate the monster. What? Oh, a plant ate the monster. Usually animals eat plants, but I guess in the realm of monsters, anything's possible. Moana raced for cover. Safe for the moment, she gazed around in wonder. She reached Lalotai, a strange world of mysterious plants and creatures. Here the ocean was above her, like the sky. But where was Maui? What do you think Maui is? Suddenly, a shadow loomed over her. It was another monster, lunging right at her. Whoosh! water geyser blasted the monster up and away. A geyser will be our last vocab word today. And here's a picture of a geyser. It's where hot water shoots up into the air. Sometimes they're underwater and it's just hot water shooting up. Um, like if you've ever been in a hot tub and they have those where it's like those things where you can feel like the water coming out even though it's still underwater, kind of like that. But they do it really like. I think you've probably seen that on some cartoons. The most famous one I think is Old Faithful, which is in America. It erupts. It like shoots out every hour and a half. I think they have a clock where it just does it every time at the same time, which is why it's called Old Faithful, because it does it again and again. It's very faithful. Moana tried to stay calm. Then a flock of huge bats flew out of a nearby cave. Sneaking up to the cave, Moana peeked inside. Atop a huge pile of coin of gold and shiny items, she saw Maui's fish hook. With Maui nowhere in sight, Moana decided to grab the hook herself. Just then, the ground began to shake and rise into the air. Yoo-hoo, said a voice. You're a long way from home. It was Tamatoa, the giant crab monster. Oh no, he's got her now. Tamatoa was about to toss Moana into his mouth when Maui stepped into the cave. In one swift move, the demigod grabbed both Moana and his hook. Maui smiled. You might want to stand back, he advised. It's Maui time. Maui swung his fish hook overhead so he could use his magic ability to shapeshift, so he can turn into different like animals and stuff. The fish hook glowed brightly, but something was wrong. Maui couldn't control his powers. He transformed into a fish, and a lobster, and then into a pig. This never happens to me, Maui said, confused. Tamatoa tossed Moana out of the way, then jumped forward to pin Maui to the ground. Having trouble, little demigod? The crab asked, taking the hook back. Welcome to my shiny world. Your hook belongs to me. Moana spotted an opening on the wall. While Tamatoa was busy with Maui, Moana thought she could use the crack in the wall to escape. But she couldn't leave Maui behind. Could she? Do you think she'll leave him behind? I don't think so. I think she'll rescue him. Moana had a plan. I have something shiny for you, she called. The object glowed in Moana's hand. The heart of Te-Fiti, Tamatoa said, losing all interest in Maui. The ground trembled when Tamatoa thundered toward Moana. As she fled, she stumbled and lost her grip on the heart. It fell to the ground and rolled into a small crack. The crab scrambled along the ground, grasping for his prize. Moana climbed up Tamatoa's leg and onto his feet. With all her strength, Moana pried Maui's hook from the crab's shell. Then she jumped down and pulled Maui to safety. But the heart, the demigod asked. I've got a better one, said Moana, smiling. She opened her necklace, showing that the real heart was still inside. Moana had tricked Tamatoa with a glowing barnacle. The real heart of uh, the real heart of Te-Fiti was still with Moana. When Tamatoa realized he'd been fooled, he charged after them. Maui's powers were still on the fritz and causing him to turn from fish to human and back again, and Tamatoa was almost upon them. Grabbing Maui in his hook, Moana escaped with him, with the demigod through the crack in the wall. Then whoosh! A geyser, like we said earlier, blasted Moana and Maui through the watery ceiling onto the ocean above. A moment later, they burst through the waves into daylight. They made it to the mortal world. Unfortunately, poor Maui was stuck looking like a shark, at least until the troublesome demigod mastered his shape-shifting ability. But Moana felt confident now. After defeating Tamatoa, she knows she could complete her quest. I think she can. For the rest of that story, you'll have to watch Disney's Moana. All right, I'm going to go grab my supplies for our craft, and I think we just need a piece of paper. A ruler might help, but really just a piece of paper. All right, I'll see you all very soon. Bye. All right, I think I've got this. Watching the origami guy do it again was kind of helpful, but I'm not sure if I got it right. So the first thing we do is we start with this piece of paper. We're going to fold it in half like this. Then we're going to open it up. We're going to fold the halves into half. So we're going to do like this. We're going to do like this. Right? So now we have this, like a little closet. All right, next. All right. So now we have this, right? We have our little closet, and then we fold it in again. Now we have this. So folding up from the bottom, we're going to make a triangle that doesn't go all the way, right? So we're going to do this. We're going to make a triangle that goes like that, a triangle that goes like that. And then we're going to flip it over and do the same on the other side. And they shouldn't go all the way up, but they should go almost all the way up. Maybe put like one finger in between. And we got this. Now we're going to do a small little fold here where we fold this part down. You can see we're folding, just pinching the corners down. Yeah. Pinch the corners down. All right. Pinch the corners down. And then we will do the same on the other side. So reverse, and we will pinch the same corners down. Right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold along that line. So fold like this. We'll fold it the other way. Yeah. Fold it the other way. We can wrap this around a little as well if we need to. Okay. All right. In this part, I think I messed up a little. So what we're going to do is we will get a little bit of tape. It's a little bit cheating, but this is attempt number 3. So I think I've earned a little tape today. So I'm just gonna tape the two ends together. All right. And now we have a little canoe. Like we talked about Polynesian people, Melanesian and Micronesian people sailing. We have a little canoe. All right, everyone. Well, I've loved making canoes with you. Um, but I will have to see you either next week or the week after that. I think next week is Mother's Day, and I think Grant will be with you that week. But I will see you the week after that. All right, bye everyone.